Well, do I smell that bad? Why is everyone sitting so far to the back? Did I bring a stench from Tennessee? Well, good morning. I guess more appropriately so, I should say howdy, y'all. Nashville sends its greeting characteristic of barbecue and sweet tea. So if you're looking for any summer destinations, I would highly recommend heading south on 65 and learning how to do a little line dancing. You might just have some fun. Quick question for you. You comfortable right now? How those chairs feel? Feeling pretty good? It's Friday? Okay. Well, if you're as comfortable at the end of this presentation as you are right now, then I don't think I was doing what I was called to do. Because I'm going to stretch you a little bit. Is that okay? Sure. You guys mind getting outside of your comfort zone a little bit this morning?
Sure.
Okay. There is no way in the world that I should be standing here before you this morning. As a matter of fact, I shouldn't even be breathing. Life, according to me, ended 7 years ago in a cold Canadian hospital. Without triathlon, without Timex, and sadly, without purpose. You see, today was never part of the plan. But thank goodness, life doesn't always go as planned. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky and lived a fairly normal childhood. Played sports, hung out with friends, attended summer camps. It wasn't until the age of 13 that I would meet what would become the bane of my existence. Crohn's disease. I didn't know what that meant. I was 13 years old. One day my stomach just started hurting, and it never really stopped for 13 years. All of a sudden I was a sick kid. I was the one turning down social invitations. Why? Because my stomach hurt. I couldn't stay out of the bathroom. Couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Most days, it took everything I had just to go through the motions. Life for me as a teenager was miserable. While my friends were graduating from college and planning for summer vacations, I was longing for one day without pain. I remember a particular doctor's appointment that I attended right before I left for college. And surgery at that point was recommended. Now, as bad as my life was at the moment, stomach aches, diarrhea, anemia, bone loss, fever, at least it was predictable. I knew what to expect. It's funny how I chose the pain of the familiar over the unknown that surgery brought. I had built for myself a comfort zone, and I was literally a prisoner to my pain. There was potentially a better way, but I wanted nothing to do with it because it represented change. And my immediate response to that change was resistance. So I went off to college hoping that a change of scenery would improve my condition. Do you know I spent more time in the campus medical facility at Auburn than I did in my dorm room the first year? Things weren't getting better. I was getting worse. And the more I learned about my disease, the more I understood what was going on inside of me. These flare-ups were causing inflammation in my large intestine. And that inflammation was leading to scar tissue. The pain was a result of the narrowing of the walls of my intestines. I just thought it had something to do with what I ate. I was a rebellious teenager. I didn't care what I put in my body. I was just trying to make it through the day with as least amount of pain as possible. But what I didn't know at the time is that there was permanent damage that was being caused. And the surgery that I had rejected at 19, it could have fixed me. And it could have fixed me right then. But then again, I pushed back because it represented something different. So a couple more years go by, and I had no idea to this day how I still graduated. I missed so much class. I was a prisoner in this pain cave that I'd created for myself. And the crazy thing about it is that I had a way out. But I wanted nothing to do with it because it was different. So I graduated college, moved to Nashville, and started my career as a financial advisor. As if I didn't already have enough internal pressure with my disease, I chose a field that is 100% commission. Eat what I kill, and by the way, if I don't kill, I don't eat. Well, I guess the challenge worked out okay for 2 years. Until this fateful day that I mentioned in the beginning, this cold Canadian hospital became more of my immediate reality. So let me pick back up on that and walk down that path with me. In March of 2006, I was traveling with an entertainer friend of mine in Nashville who was performing in Canada. As our flight took off, I had a stomach ache. But what was new? Every day was a stomach ache. So I didn't think anything more than it was just another day in the life of Bo. When we landed, though, something was different. Physically, I was absolutely exhausted. But visually, my stomach began starting to swell. Now, I had never seen this before, so I wasn't quite sure what was going on. The pain wasn't getting any better, and now my stomach was becoming distended. That was the last thing I remember. So, over the course of the next 8 hours, what I would learn now is that I was rushed to the emergency room in a coma and presented to the general internist at Aurelia Community Hospital with a ruptured large intestine. I was leaking bacteria. My body was septic. There was no place for the bacteria to go, so my stomach began to swell. The surgeon shook me to consciousness long enough to ask for my consent for surgery. Now keep in mind, surgery was mentioned once before. And what did I do with it? I rejected it because it was so uncomfortable to embrace the change. Well, now in this particular light, in this situation, the choice was taken away from me. If I wanted to live, surgery was the only option. So in a fog, and I barely remember him asking, I gave the nod, and he proceeded. In that moment, and I'm not proud to admit this, but for a second, I just decided to die. Life was full of pain. Why continue to fight? There was really nothing worth living. I spent more time in the bed, sick, on the toilet. I had no social life. Getting winded walking up a flight of steps, that was no life to live for a 26-year-old. And so now I had an option just to let it go. Just to die, to give up. The thought crossed my mind. But as I said at the beginning, thank goodness, life doesn't always go as planned. The next 6 weeks found me in the ICU, critical condition. I had been carved open like a Thanksgiving turkey. I had a scar that ran from my belt line to my chest. And what I was left in place of my large intestine was a man-made appliance known as an ileostomy. Now, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with that term, but an ileostomy serves the same function of a large intestine. So through this medical procedure, this appliance was affixed to the outside of my body. And so now today, permanently, I have a pouch that rests right here. Now, I know this isn't a transition area or a strip club, so I'm not going to take my shirt off right now and tell you. But if anybody would like to see it, I have no problem whatsoever showing that to you. This right here has become the best thing that has ever happened to me. And the resistance on the front end, as a young, stupid teenager having no idea what rested on the other side of the change, is that if I have a pouch, a bag, an ileostomy, I will be a freak. I will never get married. There is no girl that's ever going to want to be intimate with me. My life is over. But again, that was the pain of my present. It was all I could see. It was right in front of me. And so my reaction was no. Funny how things work out. 6 years later, faced with a life or death situation, having only one option to live, once again, my ileostomy saved my life. Now, the road to recovery, it was long, it was tedious, it was painful, and most remarkably, it's still going. After 6 weeks in Canada, I was finally able to make it back to Nashville. And during that first week, I received an outpouring of love and support from friends and family. And it was from one such friend on one such visit that I was introduced to my passion. Brian Taylor had just competed in a local triathlon and was reliving the event for me as I lay flat on my back one summer day in June of 2006. From the first time I heard about a multi-sport event, I was hooked. I knew I had to do one. Here I was, 6 weeks removed from surgery, had no business in the world even walking, much less thinking about triathlon, but I was determined. Anyone relate? Determination will overcome mountains of adversity. So, June of 2006, my triathlon training began. And you know my first training session? A walk to the mailbox. The next week, it was a walk around the block. Guys, by the end of June, I'd actually bought a bike and I could sit on it. By the beginning of that second month, my wound was starting to heal, and I actually was able to extend my bike rides out to 5 miles. So after July, which again, 2 months of training, I signed up for my first race. The Old Hickory Lakes Triathlon in Hendersonville, Tennessee. August 26th. I had 6 weeks to prepare, but I had yet to get in the water. Now I was a little nervous for obvious reasons. We are land-dwelling creatures not meant to be in the water. It amazes me how Michael Phelps and Ryan Lochte and heck, most of my teammates can move in the water. But I wasn't a swimmer, and I had a pretty good excuse having a scar bigger than I care to recount that could, who knows what could happen. So I started early July, and the first time I got in the water, I almost sunk to the bottom. Absolutely humiliating experience. But I went back the second day, and I actually made it to the other end of the pool. And by the end of the first month swimming, I could actually swim for 15 minutes at one time without stopping. Now, I knew I could swim, I knew I could run, I knew I could ride a bike, but my race was a week away, and I didn't know I could put them all three together. Only one way to find out, right? I never will forget that first race. And 1 hour and 5 minutes later, I crossed the finish line in a sprint triathlon. and actually won my division. And that was all it took. And for any of you in the room who have ever done an endurance event, not necessarily triathlon, there's something about crossing a finish line that's addictive. And I certainly caught it 3 months after my surgery. 2006 saw me with 3 more events, including my first half Ironman event. I was hooked. 2007, we covered more territory. I think I raced 20 times that year. And I started to learn. I started to study. I became a student. I became a sponge. It was absolutely intoxicating. Not necessarily for the physical component, but it was my motivation for recovery. I had been dead in a Canadian hospital a year and a half earlier. And now I was racing triathlons almost every single weekend. Who would have thought? I say again, I'm certainly glad my life hasn't worked out according to my plan. 2008, it was time to walk the Ironman trail. There's something about Ironman and triathlon that's just captivating. And I knew I couldn't ever be satisfied until I did that first one. So, coming into a wedding season, I decided to pick Ironman New Zealand for my first Ironman. As if one Ironman in the United States, in proximity to my home, wasn't enough, we picked going halfway across the world. And it was a fantastic experience. And I'm happy to say my wife is still married too. 2 months later, we decided to do another one, Ironman UK. If any of you have spent any time in the southern part of London, in the summer, conditions not necessarily favorable. Cold, windy, but it's Ironman. So Ironman is 140.6 miles wherever it is you're doing it. It's no small task. So 2008 was another big year. 2009, my fourth season, is what I call my absolute favorite year, and started to build a foundation for my presence here and my attachment to this wonderful company. In the summer of 2009, I met our multi-sport team manager, Tristan Brown, in Providence, Rhode Island. Now, this was my fourth season racing triathlon, and I'd say I was good, but not really. I was just in love with the new sport. And so when I heard of this concept of a team and sponsors and cool equipment, it's like, I got to be on that team. I don't know how it's going to happen. I'm certainly not worthy, but I'm going to figure out a way to make it happen. So I went to work on Tristan, and I pestered him until the cows came home, to use a southern analogy. And that first year I submitted my resume, and Tristan was encouraging. Respectfully declined, of course, for good reasons. But just like my first brush with death in my way back, that simply added to my determination, because it's something that I wanted so bad. And so I pursued it. I kept racing. 2010 was another good year. Submitted another resume. Again, timing wasn't of the essence. So once again, I found myself wanting. 2011, a curveball was thrown into my recovery. A complication from my first surgery presented itself, and a second surgery was needed. So, early part of 2011 found me once again in the emergency room, this time in Cleveland, Ohio, much better than Canada, and it was a surgery that I planned for. The thing about emergency surgeries are the healing time is so much longer than those that we elect for. So one other point, if anything you take from this, if there's any surgery that's been recommended for you, based on my experience, it's probably a better idea to do it when it's your choice and not your body's choice. That recovery was much less, and I actually got to race a couple times that year. So at the end of 2011, I finally turned a corner. And for whatever reason in the world, a small miracle was achieved, and Tristan gave me a shot. And I was on my way to New York for the Timex multi-sport camp at the New York Giants training facility. And that was the beginning of my dream, of which I'm still living today. Because guys, it's not just about triathlon, it's about the people. Tristan's relationship led to Brian's. Brian's relationship led to Paya's. Paya's relationship led to Sam's. Sam's relationship led to Paul's and Briggs and every other wonderful person that I've gotten to be associated with in this organization. And I was just reminded of that by interacting with Maura this morning, who I understand just got a promotion, so congratulations to you as well.